She didn't think about you the most when you impressed her. She thought about you the most when you confused her, when something about you didn't add up in a way she couldn't ignore. That's where this whole journey begins. Because staying on someone's mind isn't about chasing, convincing, or proving. It's about becoming a feeling she can't quite explain. And the most powerful people in history understood one thing: the human mind holds on to mystery far more than certainty. If you want to stay on her mind, you must first understand this truth: people remember the person who makes them feel, not the one who tries to be perfect. So stop giving her a predictable version of yourself. Predictability is forgettable. Surprise is unforgettable. You stay on her mind when you show interest, but not all at once. When you're present, but not available every second. When you listen, but reveal only the parts of yourself that carry real weight. That balance between warmth and distance is where attraction breathes. Too much of you, she takes you for granted. Too little, she gives up. Just enough, and she's replaying every interaction in her head, wondering what you're thinking. People fall for what they can't fully understand. And that means you must become a man with layers, someone she can't decode in one conversation. When you speak, let your words carry intention. When you act, let your actions carry purpose. And when you disappear, don't explain it. The moment she can't predict you, she begins to imagine you. And imagination is the most powerful form of connection. Remember, you don't stay on her mind by giving her everything at once. You stay on her mind by giving her something worth thinking about. A moment where your confidence showed without arrogance. A silence that felt intentional. A glance that carried meaning she couldn't quite decipher. And here's the secret most men never learn. The mind obsesses over contrast. Be calm but passionate. Gentle but firm. Patient but driven. Show her that you're capable of emotion, but not controlled by it. That you can care but you don't collapse. This contrast makes her feel something rare, something she doesn't experience with everyone else. But the most important part? Control your attention. When your attention is scarce, it becomes valuable. When you choose to focus on her not out of desperation, but out of intention, she feels it differently. She feels chosen. And when a woman feels chosen by a man who isn't easily swayed, that's when you live in her thoughts long after the conversation ends. You want to stay on her mind. Become the man who carries himself like his life has purpose. The man whose presence feels meaningful and whose absence feels noticeable. The man who doesn't just take space but creates energy when he enters a room. Because in the end, she won't remember the man who wanted her the most. She'll remember the man who made her feel something she couldn't forget. There is a peculiar truth about the human mind that most people never understand. We are drawn not to what is fully seen, but to what is partially hidden. The visible is ordinary. The unseen pulls us in. And in the realm of connection, especially between a man and a woman, what is left unsaid carries far more power than what is stated clearly. Mystery isn't a trick. It is a psychological architecture rooted in how desire forms, grows, and reshapes itself. Think of it this way: when someone presents themselves completely, without nuance, without layers, the mind stops searching. There is nothing left to uncover, no further depth to explore. The story ends too soon, and humans do not remain fascinated by stories that end quickly. We remain fascinated by the ones that open slowly, revealing meaning through contradiction, silence, and presence. A person becomes unforgettable when they reveal themselves in fragments, rather than confessions. This is where most men go wrong. They assume that openness is always rewarded, that saying everything, expressing everything, offering everything will make them appear sincere. They believe desire is a puzzle solved through information, when in truth desire is a flame fed by imagination. The more she imagines, the more she invests. The more she invests, the deeper you sit in her unconscious. The mind doesn't cling to what it fully understands. It clings to what it cannot fully solve. A woman doesn't think about the man who gives her all the answers. She thinks about the man whose presence awakens questions within her, questions about who he is, what he feels, what he intends. That subtle uncertainty, not chaos, but unpredictability, creates tension. And tension births desire. But mystery must be honest, not fabricated. It comes from having a life that genuinely extends beyond her, a purpose that occupies your attention, a sense of self that doesn't rely on validation. When a man knows himself, he does not speak to impress, nor reveal to convince. His restraint becomes powerful because it is rooted in authenticity, not manipulation. There is a particular energy in a man who is selective with his words. His silence doesn't feel like absence, it feels like intention. She senses that he has worlds within him that he isn't unveiling yet, not because he's hiding, but because he understands the value of pacing. When he speaks, his words carry weight. When he shares something personal, it feels like a rare gift rather than an obligation. This is what activates her curiosity, the feeling that there is more beneath the surface. Humans project depth onto those who display just enough to ignite intrigue, but not enough to extinguish it. In psychology, this is known as the allure of incompleteness. We are compelled to fill in the gaps, and the more gaps you leave, the more she thinks about you. Mystery is not disappearance. It is presence layered with unpredictability. You're not withholding affection, you're withholding certainty. You show her glimpses of your passion, but not all of your intention. You give her your time, but not every free moment. You reveal your values, but not every wound. You allow her to feel your strength, but not your entire story. In doing this, you give her something to pursue not because you're playing a game, but because you've become a man with internal boundaries and emotional sovereignty. The greatest form of male attractiveness is the combination of warmth and self-possession. A man who is capable of connection yet centered within himself becomes psychologically magnetic. He becomes a symbol of something rare in an age where most people overshare, over-explain, and overexpose themselves. Women are perceptive in ways men often underestimate. They sense depth. They sense direction. They sense when a man is guided by something larger than desire. And paradoxically, that is what magnifies desire. A man who does not orbit her becomes the one she begins to orbit mentally. She feels the gravity of someone whose life is already rich with meaning, and that gravity pulls her thoughts toward him long after he leaves the room. The essence of this principle is simple. You do not stay in her mind by force. You remain there by influence. Influence is not loud. Influence does not chase. Influence does not demand. Influence creates an emotional imprint, a psychological resonance that lingers in the quiet moments when she least expects it. Mystery is the psychological invitation for her to explore you gradually, and that journey creates attachment for deeper than immediate clarity ever could. Reveal less. Project more. Let your presence speak in ways your words do not. Because the man who understands how to move with intention becomes unforgettable not by effort, but by design. A person becomes unforgettable when they allow others to discover them slowly. If you want her to think about you, give her something worth thinking about. That is the law. That is the psychology. That is the power. And the choice to embody it begins with you. Human emotion is not shaped by consistency. It is shaped by contrast. Everything we remember, every person who lingers in our mind stayed there, because they made us feel more than one thing. Not in chaos, not in confusion, but in depth. A single emotion rarely creates attachment. It's the interplay between feelings, the tension and release, the push and pull, that creates a psychological and almost physical imprint. Desire lives in contrast. Attraction lives in contrast. The memory of someone lives in contrast. Imagine meeting someone who is always calm, always agreeable, always predictable. At first, you may feel comfort, but comfort alone is not enough to create desire. The mind adapts, the heart flattens, the person becomes emotionally one-dimensional, and a one-dimensional experience does not occupy the unconscious. It is contrast that leaves the mark, the shift from softness to strength, from attention to absence. From intensity to restraint. It is the emotional movement that shapes the psychological bond. This is why people remember how you made them feel, not what you told them. Words fade. Emotional impact does not. But emotional impact is not generated through intensity alone. It comes from balance, the balance between warmth and independence, passion and control, energy and stillness. These opposites create a rhythm the mind cannot resist. In relationships, especially in attraction, emotional contrast becomes a form of psychological polarity, and polarity is the raw material of desire. A woman does not remember the man who was simply nice to her. Niceness alone is static. It carries no dynamic energy. She remembers the man who made her feel safe yet excited, appreciated yet challenged, understood yet curious. She remembers the man who activated different parts of her emotional landscape, who brought light to areas she didn't realize were dormant. This is not manipulation, this is human psychology. Jung described the psyche as a constellation of opposites seeking integration. Meaningful connection emerges when two people awaken those opposites within one another. If you remain emotionally flat, she cannot feel you. And if she cannot feel you, she cannot remember you. You leave an impression when your presence carries emotional dimension. This is why restraint is powerful. Not silence born from fear, but silence born from certainty. The quiet confidence of a man who does not need validation, but chooses connection creates emotional tension. And tension is not the enemy of attraction, it is the spark. That small gap between what she knows and what she wants to know. That space between comfort and yearning. That stretch between what you reveal and what you hold back creates a psychological echo. She thinks about you because the interaction with you had multiple emotional layers. But emotional contrast requires sincerity. It cannot be performed. It cannot be faked. It arises from a man who has developed himself internally. A man who can shift between strength and tenderness because he genuinely possesses both. Emotional contrast is not about mood swings. It is about emotional richness. It is about being human in a world where everyone is trying too hard to be a singular, polished idea. You stay in her mind when you show her that you are not confined to one version of yourself. There are moments when your calmness should ground her, moments when your intensity should inspire her, moments when your stillness should intrigue her, and moments when your presence should challenge her to rise. When she experiences the full spectrum of who you are, not all at once, but in honest, natural shifts, you become a multi-dimensional memory. This is also where sexual psychology enters quietly. Because sexual attraction is deeply tied to emotional rhythm. Desire builds through contrast, anticipation versus fulfillment, closeness versus distance, tension versus release. When a man understands emotional contrast, he naturally becomes more sexually magnetic, because he mirrors the very nature of desire itself: movement, fluctuation, polarity. A man who can evoke multiple emotional states within a woman becomes psychologically unforgettable. Not because he overwhelms her, but because he touches different layers of her psyche, layers that might have gone untouched for years. Every time a new emotional experience is tied to you, her mind stores it. And the more emotional associations connected to you, the deeper the imprint becomes. This is how emotional contrast makes you unforgettable. You become the internal reference point she compares other men to without realizing it. But emotional contrast requires a grounded core. If your emotions are unstable, you create anxiety, not attraction. The contrast must be anchored in self-awareness. When your internal center is strong, you can shift between different emotional states smoothly. Your warmth does not make you weak, and your firmness does not make you cold. You become whole, and wholeness is rare. The man who understands this principle does not try to be unforgettable. He becomes unforgettable because he offers something real, something the modern world rarely provides: emotional depth, carried with masculine steadiness, a presence that is neither overwhelming nor passive, but alive, aware, and responsive. A presence that allows a woman to feel, to explore, to open. You do not stay in her mind by being emotionally loud, but by being emotionally layered. When you understand the power of contrast, you realize that the most magnetic thing you can offer is the full, balanced spectrum of your humanity. And once she experiences that, she will think about you long after she walks away, not because you tried to impress her, but because you awakened something within her. Be the experience she cannot replace. Power in human relationships has never belonged to the one who insists on being present. It has always belonged to the one who understands the value of controlled distance, not absence, but intentional space, not withdrawal, but emotional independence. In psychological terms, this distance does not create separation, it creates gravity. It allows the other person to feel your presence even when you are not physically there. And that is a deeper form of connection than endless proximity could ever offer. To understand this, we must first accept a difficult truth. The mind cannot crave what it constantly consumes. The more available you are, the more predictable you become. And when you become predictable, the mind stops reaching for you. This is not about playing games. It is about respecting the natural laws of desire. Desire needs distance the way fire needs oxygen. Too much closeness suffocates it. Too much pursuit weakens it. When a man removes all space, he removes the psychological field where longing grows. There is a profound difference between being emotionally open and being constantly present. Emotional openness comes from truth. Constant presence comes from fear, the fear of losing someone, the fear of missing out, the fear that if you are not always there, you will be forgotten. Yet it is that very fear that makes you forgettable. Because when someone knows you will always be there, your value feels inevitable. And inevitability kills tension. It kills wonder. It kills the sense of choice that makes connection meaningful. Controlled distance, however, creates emotional contrast and psychological depth. It shows that your world does not collapse into one person. It shows that you are guided by purpose, not need. It shows that your time, attention, and energy are not given out of desperation, but out of intention. This distinction is subtle, but it forms the entire foundation of masculine presence. A man who is always available becomes background noise. A man who knows when to step back becomes an echo that stays in the mind. Controlled distance is not coldness. It is balance. When you are with her, you are fully present, focused, attentive, grounded. But when you return to your own world, your silence carries meaning. It says, without words, I have a life beyond this moment, and you are welcome to be part of it. But I am not defined by your attention. That sense of inner stability is rare, and whatever is rare becomes magnetic. A woman will never respect a man who abandons himself for her. She respects the man who remains loyal to his own path while inviting her to walk beside him. This is not dominance. It is psychological integrity. The ability to hold your center, to remain rooted in your purpose even when emotions rise. Even when attraction intensifies, even when the desire to merge feels overwhelming. Jung often spoke of the individuation process, the journey of becoming whole within oneself. Controlled distance is the masculine expression of that journey. It preserves your identity, your vision, your direction, even as you connect deeply with another. This distance also awakens something primal in her. When she senses that you cannot be consumed, she begins to value the parts of you she can access. The more you prioritize your mission, the more she feels the weight of your presence. The more you protect your time, the more meaningful the moments with you become. The less you chase, the more she leans in, not because she is manipulated, but because your independence signals psychological maturity. There is a quiet sexual undercurrent beneath this principle as well. Sexual tension is born from polarity, not closeness without borders, but closeness interrupted by space. The anticipation created by distance magnifies desire. The mind begins to imagine, and imagination enlarges emotion far more than physical proximity ever could. When she cannot predict when you will reach out or how much you will reveal, her thoughts naturally flow toward you, not out of anxiety, but out of curiosity, not out of insecurity, but out of attraction. But controlled distance does not mean emotional avoidance. Avoidance is rooted in fear. Distance is rooted in strength. Avoidance disconnects. Distance energizes. The man who avoids is hiding. The man who balances presence with space is anchoring himself. The key is intention. Your distance should have direction. You are not stepping back to create reaction. You are stepping back to maintain your center. You are stepping back because your purpose demands attention, because your life extends beyond romance, because connection must complement your identity, not replace it. This is why controlled distance creates power. It establishes boundaries that elevate your value. It shows that your heart is open, but your life is not empty. It shows that you care, but you do not collapse. It shows that you desire her, but you do not depend on her for direction, identity, or meaning. The paradox is this: when you stop clinging, she starts wanting. When you stop proving, she starts noticing. When you stop offering yourself too freely, she starts valuing what you offer. Controlled distance is not a tactic. It is a lifestyle, a way of carrying yourself with dignity, focus, and emotional sovereignty. A way of honoring the relationship between presence and absence, desire and discipline, connection and individuality. In the end, the man who knows how to step back becomes the one she steps toward, not because he demanded it, but because his energy gave her something to lean into. Respect your own distance. The human mind is endlessly drawn toward what it cannot fully predict, not because unpredictability itself is attractive, but because the psyche is wired to seek patterns, and when a pattern is incomplete, the mind keeps returning to it. This is one of the most fascinating truths of human psychology. A person becomes unforgettable, not through perfection, but through unpredictability wrapped in consistency. A subtle contradiction, a deliberate paradox, something that can be sensed but not fully understood. We do not obsess over the familiar. We obsess over what interrupts our expectations. We think about what doesn't fit neatly into our categories. We remember the ones who behave just slightly outside the patterns we anticipated. Not chaotic, but unexpected. Not erratic, but layered. These are the people who leave psychic imprints, who linger in dreams, who echo in moments of silence. A man becomes unforgettable when a woman cannot fully map him. This does not mean being confusing or unreliable. It means refusing to shrink yourself into an easily digestible, predictable silhouette. It means allowing your complexity to be visible, your discipline and your softness, your ambition and your stillness, your presence and your silence. It means embracing a form of masculine and depth that does not reveal itself all at once. Predictability comforts. Unpredictability fascinates. The right balance binds the mind. Think of how attraction naturally works. When someone's behavior becomes obvious, their emotional impact fades. You know exactly what they'll say, exactly how they'll react, exactly what they want. And soon the mind stops searching. There is no mystery left to explore, no uncertainty to stimulate imagination. But when someone moves with intention rather than habit, when their choices reveal inner depth, when their emotions are expressed consciously rather than impulsively, the mind recognizes something rare. It cannot predict him not because he is irrational, but because he is self-guided. His actions come from his inner world, not from external pressure or emotional hunger. This makes him impossible to categorize. And what cannot be categorized becomes psychologically magnetic. Jung believed the psyche is activated by what lies just beyond understanding. The unknown pulls us, the partially understood captivates us, and when a person embodies that space, when their presence hints at depth without exposing all of it, they stir something ancient in the unconscious. A woman thinks more about the man whose emotions are sincere, but not simplistic. The man whose silence is meaningful, not defensive. The man whose decisions are guided by principles she may sense but not fully decode. In this way, he becomes a living symbol in her mind, not a riddle, but a story unfolding. We are not drawn to answers. We are drawn to questions that feel alive. This psychological phenomenon extends into sexual energy as well. Desire thrives in uncertainty, not insecurity, but anticipation. The space between knowing and not knowing is erotic. The tension of what might happen, of who he might be beneath the surface, awakens instinctive curiosity. When a man is fully predictable, sexual energy collapses into routine. But when he carries the energy of a man who thinks for himself, who chooses with intention, who reveals slowly and naturally, the erotic imagination comes alive. And imagination is the birthplace of powerful connection. But unpredictability must be honest. Forced unpredictability becomes manipulation. True unpredictability arises when you live from your inner world, your values, your mission, your emotional depth rather than from external approval. This is what makes you feel different to her. This is what makes your presence stand out in a sea of monotonous behavior. When you live with inner meaning, you become impossible to predict because you do not follow the scripts that most people do. You are not seeking constant validation. You are not performing a persona. You are not sacrificing your individuality for closeness. You are guided by something deeper: your self-awareness, your purpose, your integrity. And that authenticity creates a form of unpredictability the psyche instinctively respects. She begins wondering what drives you. She begins imagining your inner world. She begins noticing your subtleties, your pauses, your glances, your tone. This is how fascination grows. People think more about what disrupts their mental patterns. When your presence introduces nuance where she expected simplicity, or strength where she expected hesitation, or calm where she expected reaction, you become psychologically significant. The mind attaches to what expands it. A predictable man leaves no impression. A self-directed man leaves a psychological footprint. This is why emotional consistency matters even more when unpredictability is present. If your unpredictability is rooted in authenticity, not chaos, it creates the ideal tension between stability and surprise. She knows your core is steady, but your expression is alive. You are reliable, but not routine. She feels safe but awakened, and that combination is rare enough to be unforgettable. Live in a way that she cannot anticipate every version of you, not because you are hiding parts of yourself, but because you are still discovering them, because you are growing, because you are deepening, because your inner world is in motion. Become the man whose presence expands her understanding of masculine depth. Become the experience she reflects on, not the one she can predict. Predictability may comfort the mind, but unpredictability captivates the soul. That is the psychology. That is the allure. And that is where your power lives. Human beings do not bond through logic. They bond through emotional resonance. It is not the rational mind that returns to someone late at night, replaying moments in silence. It is the emotional mind, the unconscious, the place where impressions sink deeper than thought, deeper than explanation, deeper than words. If you want to remain in someone's memory, truly remain, you must speak to the part of them that thinks without language, the part that feels. We often imagine that people remember us for our actions, our intelligence, our confidence, our looks. But what they truly remember is the state we awaken within them. Every person you've ever longed for, every person who has ever lingered in your psyche, stayed there because of the emotional imprint they left. An imprint formed not by logic, but by sensation, by emotional color, texture, and contrast. This is where the deeper psychology begins. Jung believed that the strongest bonds are formed not at the level of conscious dialogue, but at the level of the shadow and the soul, the emotional realm, the symbolic realm. You become unforgettable when you become associated with an inner experience that feels meaningful, rare, or transformative to the other person. She may not remember every word you said, but she will remember the tension in your voice, the steadiness in your gaze, the way it felt when you were near her. People forget content. They do not forget emotional impact. A man becomes unforgettable when he awakens something within her that she does not normally feel. Something that disturbs her comfort just enough to stimulate desire. Something that pulls her slightly out of her habitual emotional patterns. This is not manipulation, it is psychological presence. Most men interact from the surface. They speak in ways that inform, impress, or entertain, but very few speak in a way that moves. Women do not think about men who offer clarity. They think about men who offer emotional stimulation. The man who can activate warmth and uncertainty, safety and intensity, calmness and longing. He becomes the emotional reference point. Her mind returns to without permission, because attraction is not simply about liking someone. It is about feeling someone, feeling their energy, feeling their emotional signature. And your emotional signature is not formed by what you say, it is formed by how deeply you inhabit yourself. When you speak from your center, when your presence is anchored in authenticity, when your energy is unforced yet unapologetic, you influence the emotional field around you. You change the atmosphere. A simple glance can slow a moment down. A controlled silence can become more erotic than 1,000 words. A touch, if given with intention, can awaken a part of her that logic cannot access. Feelings create memory. Intensity creates imprint. Emotional resonance creates attachment. The most powerful form of masculine influence is not dominance, it is depth. Not pressure, it is presence. A woman feels a man who has depth because depth is rare. In a world where most people are distracted, fragmented, emotionally numb, the man who is fully present becomes emotionally magnetic. He becomes a living antidote to the noise of everything else. She may not fully understand why she's drawn to him, but she feels it, and feeling has always overpowered logic. This is why emotional intelligence matters. Not the soft, performative kind, but the kind rooted in awareness of your own inner landscape. When you understand your emotions, your desire, your fear, your hunger, your restraint, you can express them consciously instead of leaking them unconsciously. That expression becomes power. It becomes clarity. It becomes magnetism. She feels safe because you know yourself. She feels intrigue because you reveal yourself gradually. And she feels desire because your emotions do not control you, you control them. This creates a form of psychological elevation. Your presence elevates her internal experience. She feels more alive around you, more aware, more present, more feminine, more open. She feels that her emotions have space to breathe in your presence. This is the kind of emotional influence that stays, the kind that lingers, the kind that makes your absence felt long after you leave. When a man influences feelings, he becomes part of a woman's interior world. And once you enter that deeper realm, she does not simply remember you, she carries you. You become an inner presence, an image, a sensation, a symbol, something she associates with a level of emotional depth that everyday life cannot provide. Your goal is not to impress her logically. Your goal is to awaken her emotionally, because logic may convince someone to stay. But emotion is what makes them return in their mind again and again. The emotional mind does not let go of someone who made it feel something new, something intense, something meaningful. The emotional mind is loyal to experience, and you become unforgettable when you become an experience, not a concept. Influence the heart, and the mind will follow. That is the depth, that is the psychology, and that is your power.